So now I got the offer, check traffic, look it to the right, and as you can see, the car will change the lane for you. So let's try the boost mode. Push on that pedal, 10 seconds of visual power, and taking off. All right, so let's try the launch control in the BMW i5 M60 Touring. My modes, sport mode on, left foot on the brake pedal, boost mode, launch control active. Here we go. Oh, this car is so fast. It's gonna give me car sick in no time. Hey guys, welcome back to the BMW blog YouTube channel and welcome to Germany once again. It's been our second home for the last few months and now we are back here once again because we have to test drive a new BMW, and that's the BMW i5 Touring. Unfortunately, the car is still not coming to the US. We're only getting the M5 Touring, but we came to Europe because it's such an important car for the European market, so we had to test it. 95% of this 5 Series volume sold in Europe, they're actually Tourings. Even more interesting, BMW sells more Tourings than sedans in Germany. So of course, we had to come here to see what's this car all about. It is clearly based on the BMW i5 sedan when it comes to the drivetrain and several features, but there are also several components in the car which are unique to the 5 Series Touring body style. It's a dual motor setup in the BMW i5 M60 Touring, and of course this is the souped up version of the Touring family. The electric motors in the car deliver 601 PS and 820 Newton meters of torque. That's a massive amount of torque, and of course that's gonna make a huge difference, especially when you take off. Speaking of taking off, 0 to 100 kilometers per hour comes in 3.9 seconds, and the top speed it's limited to 230 kilometers per hour. Of course, it's an electric Touring, so it comes with a large battery pack which is embedded within the chassis. It's an 81.2 kilowatts hour battery which gives you a range up to 506 kilometers on the WLTP standards. Of course, that figure changes because depending how you spec the car, on the options on the car, on the tires, you could have a lower number, but that's the highest number that you can achieve. Of course, the electric range can vary based on the model equipment, on the tire choice. Right now we're on 21-inch wheels with the low rolling resistance tires. The i5 M60 Touring, just like the i5 sedan, comes with 205 kilowatts charging capability, which is enough to give you about 144 kilometers of range in just 10 minutes. From 10 to 80%, it also takes about 30 to 32 minutes. Of course, you can charge the car on AC charging as well, and it has a capacity of 22 kilowatts. It's a Touring, it's a practical car, so of course the cargo capacity has to match that. It starts at 570 liters, but it can be expanded up to 1700 liters if you put the rear seats flat. It's a Touring, so it has to be practical. Therefore, BMW gave this i5 M60 Touring a towing capacity from 1500 kilograms to 2000 kilograms. Since we're on the topic of charging, there is also an update to the BMW eRoute. So the eRoute, it's a software component in the car which takes into account several factors, from the car telematics to the GPS to the speed to the location where you're at to the location where you're going. There are a lot of parameters that takes into account, and that's useful because that new update to the eRoute, it will calculate the fastest route for you with charging times. What's new also in the eRoute is the fact that it takes into consideration other new factors, like, do I charge at this charging network which has only 2 stations, or should I go to the next one which has maybe 20? And that gives you flexibility, because if you're charging at a network where there are only 2 stations available and one might be down or both of them, then of course you might be in trouble. But if you have the option of 20 charging stations, then of course that's the preferred way to do it. There is an additional variable in this algorithm, and that's the amenities. So what do I mean by that? Well, essentially imagine that you have to stop for 30 minutes. Do you prefer to stop at a gas station that has no amenities, no restaurant, no Starbucks? Or would you prefer to stop at a charging station that has all these amenities available to you? So essentially that's something new in the car that will make your journey a little bit easier. In Germany, you can also use the plug and charge feature. And what it essentially means is that you can connect up to 5 different contracts with the car. So you can just go to a single network, you plug in the cable, and you talk to the car immediately, and it starts charging. So before we get into the driving dynamics, let's talk about the weight of the car, because of course it has increased in size compared to the previous 5 Series Touring. So with the battery, this i5 M60 weighs 2,350 kilograms. So that's a quite heavy car. Of course, you can also opt for the i5 eDrive 40, which I'm going to drive as well, and that's almost 200 kilograms lighter. According to BMW, when they developed the new i5 Touring and the M60, of course, they wanted to not differentiate between the sedan and the Touring when it comes to the driving experience for the customer. They want customers to not think too much about the model that they're driving, and they want to have a similar driving experience. Of course, that's a lot harder to do on the Touring side, mostly because of the design of the car. It's completely different. So you have a different subframe in the rear, so you need to deal with that. Of course, it's also a little bit heavier, and all these things needed to be taken into consideration. Therefore, the BMW i5 Touring comes with a different axle in the rear. There is also more weight going to the back compared to the sedan version. The suspension also had to be tuned up in a different way, because now you have more forces in the rear. One of the engineers told me that they had to work very closely with the force reaction of the damper. In other words, they wanted the car to feel quite flat as driving. The reaction time of these dampers has to be a little bit quicker, because let's assume that you're hitting a pothole or some uneven pavement. You want that damper reaction to be quite quick. Of course, other things had to be adapted, like the limited slip on the car, the lateral forces as well, to account for the larger body style of the Touring. Now, when it comes to the suspension, as you recall from the i5 sedan, there are quite a few options, so I'm gonna list them quickly. There is a base suspension, there is a sport suspension, which is about 8 millimeters lower, there is a control suspension, which is about 4 millimeters lower. Then there is the adaptive suspension, which is also 8 millimeters lower. And then there is an adaptive M suspension, which is part of this car. And that's the highest setting offered in this i5 Touring. Of course, this is an M performance car, hence the M60 name. So the suspension had to be tailored to have a little bit of that M DNA. Therefore, the engineers tuned up the suspension to provide more forces, to control the body to turn quicker in corners, and of course smoother. This adaptive M suspension is also paired with the rear axle steering in the car, which can turn up to 2.5 degrees. Additionally, in the BMW i5 M60, you'll also get in the active roll stabilizer. Of course, the ultimate goal of an adaptive M suspension is really to provide less rolling angles in the car. And that's important in situations like this. As you can see, I'm floating in the car, I'm rolling into the corner, and the car just stays flat. Well, hopefully you're not bored by now, because this is when the fun starts. So here we go. Instant acceleration, nice curvy roads, and the car just simply takes off. I mean, you're getting up to high speeds in no time, and that's the beauty of the electric drivetrains. Of course, this is why I love coming to Germany, because you get these nice curvy roads, plenty of bends, elevations, very smooth pavement. You can really test the car, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do right now. So let's see. Accelerating corner, you can push the car quite hard. You can see how composed it really is. Unbelievable. Just look, going to the corner. The grip, it's amazing, of course, because of the X-Drive setup. I'm also riding on sport tires. Brakes are great, of course, M Sport brakes. Always standard on M Performance automobiles. All right, so that was a nice stretch of curvy roads in the comfort mode. But of course, just like the other BMWs, you can tune up the car even more. So let's do that. All right, so all you have to do is go to My Modes, I'm gonna select Sport. The entire layout changes to this very red and blue look. Everything is dialed up from the suspension to the steering to braking and also the engine power. So let's see if it makes a difference. So immediately I can feel the car being sharper, of course, something that I've experienced in the past with other BMWs, not just electric. There is less body roll, of course, the ride is a little bit more bouncy. That's expected because the dampers have stiffened up quite a bit. There is still a really good rebound on those dampers, and even though the road is not perfect here, the ride is quite flat and quite smooth as the engineers described it. You know, turning in just as good, a lot more composed, lifting off using the brake regeneration to brake for me, and now again turning in, really nicely balanced car. I can feel more weight in the rear, of course, and I can feel the weight of the car overall being quite heavy. But honestly, when you push it hard, you don't really feel it because the 601 PS really takes away some of that weight. Since I mentioned brake regeneration, let me switch into the B mode. So aside from the adaptive modes that are available in the BMW electric cars, you also have this one paddle mode. Now essentially the brake regeneration, it's gonna be the most aggressive setting. You can see I can lift off and the car essentially stops by itself. So what I like about that mode, especially when going fast, is the fact that I don't have to use the brakes too much. Of course, it's also the most aggressive setting, which could induce some motion sickness. But of course, you can still use the regular adaptive mode, which will control the brake regeneration based on the driving conditions. One of the features that I like in the car is the iconic sounds. I know some of you don't like those, but I do. You can turn them on and off, so they were off, but I can put them on. And now you're getting this unique sound in the car, which was composed by Hans Zimmer, the renowned Oscar-winning composer. And of course, you're getting different sounds in different modes. So if you go to the more efficient mode, it's a completely different soundtrack. If you go to, let's say, personal, different. But then of course, if you want that more aggressive sound, you can go into the sport mode. And you can hear that sound building up. It sounds more futuristic as you go faster. Let me show you one of my favorite modes in the car, the expressive mode. And maybe you can hear this sound right now, so. Gets more aggressive as you speed up. Very interesting. The BMW i5 M60 Touring comes available with the highway assistant. It's available in the US, Canada, but also in Germany. What it essentially means that you can drive hands-free up to 85 miles per hour or about 135 kilometers per hour. In Germany, I believe the speed limit is 130, but it can have an offset of 5 kilometers. All you have to do is activate the system through the I/O button on the steering wheel, lift off the accelerator, and the car will basically drive by itself. Of course, you need to pay attention to the road. You need to be in control of the car if needed, and there is a camera behind the steering wheel which will track your eye movement to make sure that you are paying attention to the road. So essentially, if you're on the Autobahn, you can drive hands-free for hours. Granted, you need to be on a highway to have this system activated. If you go off highway, it reverts to a lower system, and that's something that we've talked about in previous videos as well. I just got an alert that I can use the eye tracking feature to change lanes. So now I got the offer, check traffic, look it to the right, and as you can see, the car will change the lane for you. Now let's talk a little bit about driving through small villages and city centers, because this is where the rear axle steering comes into play. It's not all about making the car fun at high speeds, but also about making the car more controllable through narrow streets or through busy city centers. And being a quite large car and quite long, you need that. So you can see it's easy to turn the car around, rolls around its axis quite nicely. Of course, parking is a little bit easier with that rear axle steering. And if you want to go fast, of course, that's going to help quite a bit with the driving dynamics. Rear axle steering, I always say, is this feature that you don't know that you need it until you really try it. So let's try the boost mode. Push on that pedal, 10 seconds of additional power, and taking off. So now in the boost mode, you get a little bit more power, up to 10 seconds at a time, and you can repeat this as often as you'd like. All right, so let's talk about the design of the BMW i5 M60. Seen here, it's fire red, also known as Vegas red in the United States. And just like the i5 M60 sedan, it's got a very particular design compared to the base i5 eDrive 40, for example. And that starts at the front end. As always, BMW wants to give their M-Performance cars a unique look, a distinct look, and of course a more aggressive, sportier look. And that's the case with this car as well. First off, compared to the eDrive 40, you have these horizontal slats on the car. Of course, this very bold and large kidney grille, really thick surrounds right there to emphasize the boldness of the car. Of course, they're still using this piano black, which I'm not usually a fan on any BMW cars, but it's there, and you also see it on the lower fascia as well. Speaking of the lower area of the car, of course, it doesn't need all the cooling of a gasoline-powered car, but it still looks cool to have this geometry there that emphasizes the sportiness of the car, gives it a unique character. And you see them right there, lots of lines running across. You can see all these V-shapes forming. And once again, it's a styling feature. Of course, there is a little bit of a cooling component as well. Other than that, really, from the front, it looks just like the i5 M60 sedan. So if you see it from that angle, you'll be pressed to tell that this is actually a different car. You still have these nice creases on the car. You know, once again, gives the car a more focused look on the road, more aggressive. And naturally, new headlights, just like the i5 sedan, identical, no laser lights, LEDs inside with those blue accents. All right, so now let's take a look at the side view, because this is probably my favorite view on this car. It's not a secret by now, I'm a fan of station wagons, of Tourings, and I'm actually happy that BMW is bringing the M5 Touring to the United States, even though they're not bringing this one. Now, if you look from the side, of course, you got the typical Touring design, something that I personally absolutely enjoy. There is no secret that I love Tourings, mostly because of the practicality, but also because of the design. As you can see, typical sloping roofline goes all the way into the back. It ends here with this somewhat of a Hofmeister kink. It's got the wreck black surrounds to emphasize once again the sportiness of the car. It's a large car. It's a little bit over 5 meters. It's 1.9 meters wide. So it has grown in size a little bit compared to the outgoing generation. Clearly, if you compare this to the sedan, it's a lot bigger. And we'll take a look at the cargo space and interior space as well in a second. Rocker panel on the bottom, quite aggressive, once again in piano black. That aims to kind of bring down the height of the car a little bit more. Of course, you have this character line, just like in other BMWs. The idea, once again, is to make the car look visually a little bit lower to the ground. Aerodynamics are quite important on the BMW i5 and on the Touring as well. And this is why you have flushed door handles. You have M-style mirrors, of course. This one, it's the optional carbon fiber. Speaking of more aerodynamic features, the wheels, of course, they're optimized to give you the best efficiency. Two-tone, black and silver. Right behind that, you have the red calipers. You can spec that in different colors, I believe, blue and black as well. All right, so let's talk about the rear end of the car. Naturally, completely different, also from the outgoing 5 Series Touring, but from the sedan, clearly. And that starts with probably my least favorite thing on the car, and that's the lack of a split tailgate. No more split tailgate. Fortunately, BMW, why? Can't be that expensive to put that in there. This is a car that needs that. It's a staple in the BMW lineup, but I guess they said that because of the design and all of that, they couldn't really do that. I'm thinking it was more of a cost issue, but I don't know for sure. So aside from that, typical taillights, of course, no difference there really compared to the sedan. You have these two light bars running across. Of course, you got the M60 badge. Proportion-wise, you can see it's got a really nice stance, really nice broad shoulders in the back, something that you see on BMW, so really something that I expected to see on this one. A very solid roof spoiler, helps with downforce, but also with the aero efficiency of the car. Rear diffuser, once again in piano black, no pipes. It's an electric vehicle. Fairly okay rear end. It's fairly clean, but it's got a little bit of too much geometry in certain angles that might throw off some people, but overall it's still my favorite variant out of the two. Now let's talk about space. So as I was driving the car, I was telling you about the space in the car, and 570 liters in the base format, and of course if you put the seats down you're gonna get an additional 1200 for about 1700 liters in total space. What's interesting about this new generation of 5 Series Touring is the fact that you're getting the same cargo space in the electric version and also in the gasoline or diesel version, so no changes there. There is a little bit of a storage space underneath here, not much, because there is a battery right there, but of course you can store some things in there if you really have to. So how about we do now the infamous BMW Black cargo test? Let's do that. All right, so here is the silly test that I usually do. So 1.9 meters tall, 6'2". As you can see, of course, plenty of space. Because I don't have any luggage with me, I can't really show how much you can fit in here, but hopefully seeing my height and my weight, you get an idea of how many things you can put in here. So, of course, if I flip over here, you can actually see there is a lot of length in here to store quite a few bags. You can probably put 3 large bags in here, plenty of carry-ons, plenty of that. Of course, you got this cover here if you want to cover up your stuff in the back. The switches to lower the rear bench if you need additional space, but overall, it's exactly what you expect from a BMW 5 Series Touring. All right, so inside the i5 M60 Touring, of course, not much of a difference from the eDrive 40, aside from minor details. We'll go into that in a second. Let's first start it with the sports steering. So M Sport steering wheel, 12 o'clock red marker. It's a staple right now in the BMW lineup. You have a 3-spoke design right here with the M stitching. So always kind of similar design in multiple models, very beefy. And of course you got this boost mode right there, and we talked about that when I drove the car. Driver orientation, of course, like most of BMWs, you got this curved display as well. Also driver oriented. I drive 8.5. The reason why I know it's that, because you get in this digital controls, which are different from iDrive 8. Carbon fiber, because it has the carbon fiber package probably, so that's an option in the car. Of course, there are other trim options as well. Interaction bar, you can see it right there, but it also runs across and also into the doors. You can customize it in different colors. It's a functional piece as well, from the fact that if you do this, you can see that thing turns into red. If you get a phone call, it can also blink. If you open the door and there is a pedestrian coming out of the car, it will alert you as well. So absolutely a cool piece in the car. Still more piano black. So unfortunately you get piano black, it scratches easily, it leaves fingerprints, but that's just the nature in some of these new products. You have it here as well. I just wish we move away from this piano black. I mean, okay, we need to move away from this, but I don't know, BMW, let's find a different material because I have to constantly do this. My favorite piece is though this iDrive controller. I'm happy it's still in the car, just like on the i5 sedan. This one has the glass package, so you're getting crystals, controls right there on the iDrive knob and also on the volume. So very cool. Wireless charging, of course, you need to have that in the car. Plenty of USB ports down here in the back as well, inside too. So something that you expect to see in the car. M Sport seats. This one is got, I think, Alcantara and that might be Veganza, of course, with the M stitching on that side and this blue stitching all around. Plenty of storage, you can see. I'm storing a lot of things in there, so I put quite a few camera and microphones in there and everything else, so nothing to worry about. You have plenty of storage space in the car. Of course, also on the sides you have the cup holders in there if you want to put your beverages. Bowers and Wilkins, of course, an option in the car. They sound fantastic. They don't have the 30 speakers like in the BMW iX, but nonetheless I tested them and they're really good. Plenty of space. I've talked about this as I was driving. As you can see, I sit comfortably here. Plenty of headroom, plenty of lateral room, no surprise there. You got this very cool panoramic roof which extends all the way in the back. Of course, you cannot open it, but this one looks fantastic, especially at nighttime. So that's kind of the interior design of the car. Of course, there's a few things that bother me, like the piano black and the lack of physical buttons. I've talked about this for so long that probably some of you are tired of this, but I still have to kind of mention them. So let's go now in the back seat and talk about the space there, because of course it's a family car, it's a versatile car, so rear space matters quite a bit. So I'm gonna hop in the back and show you that. All right, so let me show you how versatile this car really is. I adjusted the driver's seat to my driving position, of course, and you can see how much space I have in here. So I can either scooch up a little bit and be more straight up, still have plenty of headroom. I don't know, I'm talking probably 10 centimeters there, or I can lean a little bit more backwards and still plenty of room for my knees. You can see BMW did this very cool design here with these scoops in the back seat, so you gain probably another 1.5 inches, 3 centimeters in there of additional knee room, which is quite cool, and leg room, of course. Let's talk about features. Of course, you got USB-C right there and some accessories that you can connect there. We're going to show you that in the future. Continuing with the space, of course, plenty of elbow room space. You can lean into the door quite a bit. There's kind of nicely scooped in here. You can see the design on the door. And then, of course, you can travel with 2 other people. I would say if there are 3 big adults in here, it might be a little bit tight over long distances. But honestly, I think it's doable. You have plenty of middle space right here. It's exactly what you expect from this car. But compared to the outgoing model, apparently you're not gaining a lot of additional room. It's just in the millimeters kind of range. Of course, amenities, you can have cup holders right there. So maybe more plastic, but you can rest your arm. And of course, you can individually control the AC in the back too. 2 more USB-Cs. The only thing that really bothers me in this car is really the tunnel, the transmission tunnel, because it's not being used in this car. It doesn't have a traditional transmission like the ICE engines, but because it's built on a Clark platform, it retains this one and it just takes away from this middle space. In the BMW iX, for example, it's a bespoke EV platform, and you don't have this, and you can use this as storage space, or it can actually make your life easier if you travel in the middle seat. So that's kind of the only downside here. As I mentioned earlier, the panoramic roof, it's fantastic, looks even better from this angle, and I'm assuming something that your kids will enjoy because they feel like they have a lot of light inside the car. So with that being said, enough about the features. Let me go back behind the wheel and we can talk more about the driving experience. All right, so now let me put my POV headset on so we can see what this car can do on some of these amazing roads. All right, so let's see what the car can do. So once again, a bit more driving dynamics here, still in sport mode, 1 pedal feel. Look how nicely the car turns in. It's so good. Of course, you can go fast if you want to. The body control, it's actually amazing on this car because it's quite heavy, as I mentioned earlier. So being able to keep that weight in check, it's never an easy thing. Of course, having that instant torque and the acceleration helps quite a bit, but it has to be a lot of work done on the chassis, on the suspension, and of course on the steering. Speaking of steering, it's an electric car, so it's always gonna have that more artificial EPS. It doesn't feel as engaging as maybe in other sportier cars or even sedans, but nothing new there really. I experienced this in the BMW i5. There is not a lot of weight in the steering, even in the sport mode. It is a little bit more responsive, a little bit sharper. You can feel a little bit more feedback from the front tires, but honestly, overall, it's very artificial, soft. You can even have it softer in the comfort mode, but that's probably a good thing for some customers because not everybody in this segment wants a very aggressive steering. This is not an M5, even though it is tuned by M, so of course not everybody expects the same level of sportiness. When it comes to the noise level in the car, this is actually a really well insulated cabin. You don't hear a lot of noises from the outside. Of course, you're getting more tire noise than anything else. There is no combustion engine noise, clearly. So overall, I feel like this will be the perfect road trip car. And because of the aerodynamic properties of the car, you're not getting a lot of wind noise either. Of course, driving through city centers, you might be aiming for the most efficient mode, and you can do that by simply going to My Modes, Efficient Mode. You can activate maximum range also. That's going to reduce the top speed to 90 kilometers per hour. It will reduce the power and also some comfort functions. So with that, you're going to get the best efficiency out of this car. As you can see right now, I have a little bit of traffic in front of me, so that gives me the chance to talk about the BMW i5 Touring as being a good road trip car. And of course, that's the idea of the 5 Series Touring. It's always been like that. It's never been about the driving dynamics. They can reserve that for the 3 Series Touring, but it's rather been about the comfort inside the car, about the luxury, and of course about the premium features. And speaking of premium features, of course, you have all these highway assistant features, driving assistant features, plenty of other tech to make long journeys a breeze. What I need to emphasize also, it's the fact that the power delivery in BMW cars, it's completely different than, let's say, Tesla. For example, even when I push that accelerator to the metal, it's just not gonna completely take off. And that's fine, because that's exactly why I like the tuning of the electric drivetrain in BMWs. I don't want that neck snapping experience. I actually want the power to be quite linear, quite progressive. And honestly, I cannot emphasize how well it's been done in the BMW, and especially this BMW i5 M60. The way I usually end the review is with a question: should you buy this car? And when it comes to the BMW i5 M60 Touring, the answer is simply yes. There is a reason why Tourings are so popular in Europe and especially in Germany, and this car, it will likely be extremely successful for the brand. Of course, the question comes whether BMW will sell more eDrive 40 Tourings or the M60, but overall the cars are fairly identical, with the caveat that the driving experience differs a little bit. But when it comes to the practicality, the versatility, the space, and all of that, the BMW i5 Series Touring is absolutely fantastic. It provides everything from comfort, luxury, to speed and performance. And this is exactly what I experienced today driving for over 400 kilometers. So the answer is simpler than ever. Yes, this is a good car. Yes, this is a car I wish we had in the US, because I would have loved to replace an SUV with this one, either as a second car or as a first car, because it can do both. All I wish right now is that we will eventually get one of these in the US, not just the M5 Touring, because that's a lot more expensive. So with that being said, let me know in the comments below. Would you buy the 5 Series Touring if it comes to the US? And if it does, would you prefer the i5 Touring, or would you prefer a V8 or a 6-cylinder 5 Series Touring coming to America? And as always, thanks for watching us, thanks for subscribing to our channel, thanks for liking this video, and I will see you in the next one, because we have some really interesting videos coming up, from the Z4 to the new X3, and especially to the new BMW M5 sedan and Touring. I will see you in the next one.